The Intermediate Life Cycle Courses. Service Transition. Lesson 9. Change Evaluation. Welcome to Lesson 9. In this lesson, we're going to be studying the change evaluation process. We'll be covering the standard process areas from the syllabus, including purpose and objectives, scope, value, policies, principles, and basic concepts, triggers, inputs, outputs, and interfaces, and key performance indicators and metrics. The information in this lesson relates to syllabus section ST03. You can use your syllabus document to identify areas in the service transition volume for further reading as part of your self-study. Evaluation is defined in the dictionary as an act or instance of evaluating or appraising. From a service management perspective, evaluation is the process that looks at an entity, normally a service change, and decides whether it represents value for money and is performing as expected. Evaluation can help a service provider to decide whether or not to proceed with, accept into use, or pay for a service or component of a service. The evaluation process is a way of looking at deliverables we receive and deciding if they meet the appropriate quality standards. The purpose of the change evaluation process is to give service providers a consistent and standardized way of determining the performance of a service change within the context of existing and proposed services and IT infrastructure. The actual performance of a change is compared with a predicted performance, and any differences will be documented, understood, and managed. An effective change evaluation process gives service providers a very clear way of judging if a change has been successful or not, and if it has completely or partially met its original objectives. Without a thorough evaluation, a service provider doesn't know if a change has been successful and will struggle to apply any lessons learned to future changes. Change evaluation has a number of objectives. It will make sure that stakeholder expectations are set and provide change management with the information it needs to protect the live environment from dangerous or ineffective changes. The process will also evaluate the intended effects of a service change and as much of the unintended effects as is practical. The available capacity and resource will be some of the factors that will affect how far the unintended effects can be investigated. Finally, change evaluation aims to provide good quality outputs to allow change management to make an effective decision about whether a service change can be authorized or not. Think about what we've just studied. Where does this happen in your organization? Are the intended effects of a change fully and completely understood? What about any unintended effects? Are they investigated? The change evaluation process provides a focal point for this investigation. Let's move on now and look at the scope of the change evaluation process. A major part of the process scope is to support change authorization. Any change will go through a number of different authorizations in its life cycle, for example, authorization to build and authorization to test. Evaluation provides supporting information for each of these authorizations so that they are well informed. The scope of change evaluation includes formal evaluation suitable for significant changes. Organizations will have to consider when to use formal evaluation as part of the process implementation. Changes that are not evaluated by the change evaluation process will be evaluated as part of the normal change management process. The decision about when to use formal evaluation should be documented in change models for each type of change. Change evaluation provides value to the business in a number of ways. It supports value delivery by assessing if resources invested have delivered benefit. If no benefit has been delivered by a change, then evaluation can highlight the need for future improvements. Change evaluation will feed into CSI. CSI will seek to improve future changes and the prediction and measurement of change performance. There are some policies, principles, and basic concepts associated with the change evaluation process. We're going to study the policies first. The first change evaluation policy is that all service designs or service changes will need to be evaluated before being transitioned. This policy will ensure that all changes and designs are reviewed, not just high-profile or high-impact ones. The second change evaluation policy is that any deviation between actual and predicted performance will be managed by the customer or customer representative. The customer will need to either accept the change, reject the change, or mandate a new change with revised predicted performance. There is no other acceptable outcome for an evaluation. If a change does not perform as expected, the customer must be involved in deciding how to move forward. The third change evaluation policy states that whilst every change must be evaluated, only significant changes will be evaluated via the change evaluation process. As we mentioned when we studied the process scope, less significant changes can be evaluated as part of change management instead. The final policy is that change evaluation will identify risks and issues for the service being changed, and also any other services or shared infrastructure. Service changes do not just affect the new or changed service being deployed. They can also have a significant effect on existing services. This also needs to be considered, assessed, and communicated to the customer where necessary. There are three principles that guide the change evaluation process. The first change evaluation principle is that a service change will be fairly, consistently, openly, and objectively evaluated. This principle has to be adopted as far as possible within the constraints of an organization. There may, for example, be political or financial reasons that prevent this principle being fully adopted. The second change evaluation principle is that the intended and unintended effects of a change need to be identified and their consequences understood and considered. Again, this is a principle that will be adopted as far as is reasonably practical. The change evaluation process cannot continue indefinitely, and some unintended change effects may take months or even years to manifest themselves. The third change evaluation principle is that an evaluation or interim evaluation report will be provided to change management to support the decision-making process. These reports are provided whenever authorization is required. Lastly, we need to consider the basic concept associated with change evaluation. This is the model that the process uses, the Plan, Do, Check, Act model. You can see the Plan, Do, Check, Act model on this screen. Put simply, the model is an iterative four-step model typically used in process improvement. The explanation here is from the perspective of a service change. The plan stage establishes the objectives and processes necessary to deliver results in accordance with the expected service change output. The do step of the process implements the service change. Check measures the service change and compares the performance against the expected performance to ascertain any differences. And finally, Act analyzes the differences to determine their consequences and any necessary improvement actions. Using this model for change evaluation ensures consistency across all evaluations. We're not going to study the process activities for change evaluation in detail, but we'll take a high-level look at them now. You'll also find a copy of the change evaluation process flow in the study guide for this lesson. Don't forget to review it once you've completed the video content. The high-level activities undertaken during change evaluation include preparing an evaluation plan, understanding the intended effect of a change, understanding the unintended effect of a change, evaluating predicted and unpredicted performance, and applying risk management. These all feed into the final evaluation report. On the previous screen, we mentioned the performance and effects of a change. Let's look at that in more detail now. The intended effects of the change are the overall change objectives. For example, if the change was required to speed up invoice production by 25%, did it deliver this improvement? Unintended effects may be positive or negative. Speeding up invoice production may have led to the invoice printers failing due to increased workload, or it may have led to an increase in morale and overall productivity. It's important to try and understand both the intended and unintended effects of a change. Equally, performance needs to be evaluated. Performance measures if the utility and warranty of the service are being delivered. The prediction may have been that invoice production would increase, but this needs to be confirmed. It may be, for example, that the current infrastructure is unable to deliver the warranty levels required for the change to be successful. Any differences between predicted and actual performance will be recorded in a deviations report. One of the activities we mentioned on the previous screen is the preparation of the evaluation plan. This plan is the outcome of evaluation planning and confirms what needs to be done during the evaluation exercise. The evaluation plan tries to ensure that evaluation will be carried out from all relevant perspectives to fully capture the intended and unintended effects of the change. For example, we may need to evaluate from the user, customer, support, and management perspectives. Careful planning needs to take place before evaluation can begin. Okay, we've got a few more areas left to review for change evaluation. Next up, we're going to look at the process triggers, inputs, and outputs. There is one main trigger for the change evaluation process. This is a request for evaluation, which will come from change management. The trigger for the process needs to be clearly understood in order for change evaluation to be allocated enough time to carry out its activities. The inputs to the change evaluation process will include the test results and test reports, typically from the service validation and testing process. Evaluation takes these outputs from service validation and testing and uses them to help analyze performance and intended and unintended effects. Other inputs are the service design package, which describes what the service is intended to achieve, and the service acceptance criteria that explain the level of performance required for service operation to accept the service. Finally, the change proposal, RFC, change record, or change documentation will be an input, as will discussions with stakeholders about intended and expected performance levels. There is one major output from the change evaluation process, the evaluation report. The report may be an interim or final evaluation report. If a change is not performing as expected, the interim evaluation report may be completed at an early stage to provide information to stakeholders. If the evaluation process completes with no major issues, then a full evaluation report will be produced. All interim and final evaluation reports act as inputs to the change management process and support decision-making about change approval. An evaluation report contains the following sections. Risk profile. What is the residual risk after countermeasures have been implemented and once the change is implemented? Deviations report. What is the difference between actual and predicted performance after change implementation? Qualification statement. If necessary, a qualification statement will be added. This will state whether or not the change has left the service in a state in which it can be qualified. This is necessary in industries such as pharmaceuticals, where a service may need to meet strict qualifications. A validation statement. The service may need to be validated as well as qualified. The statement will advise whether or not the change has left the service in a state in which it can be validated. And finally, the evaluation report will contain a recommendation. This will recommend to change management whether they accept or reject a change. The interfaces for change evaluation are as you would expect. The process needs to be closely linked to change management to help make sure the right level of evaluation is carried out. Transition planning and support will help to make sure change evaluation gets the time and resources it needs to be successful. The process needs inputs from service validation and testing, service level management, and business relationship management to fully understand how a change should perform. We also need to touch on information management for the change evaluation process. The main types of information that relate to this process are the service portfolio, service package, service design package, service acceptance criteria, test results and report, and the evaluation report. The change evaluation process will need to understand where the information it receives will come from and when. So who will supply the service design package, and how long will they have to complete the evaluation? The quality of the inputs also needs to be carefully managed. An incomplete service design package could negatively affect the results of an evaluation. The evaluation report and any other process documentation also needs to be carefully managed and will typically be stored in the Service Knowledge Management System. Let's do an exercise now to look at how we could prove the change evaluation process is performing well. As with all ITIL processes, the change evaluation process needs to be measured to ensure it is both efficient and effective. Plan to spend 15 to 20 minutes on this exercise. You'll find some suggested answers coming up in the video lesson and in your study guide. Produce a list of 6 key performance indicators that you could use to measure the evaluation process. Try and think of 3 that would be measured from a customer perspective and 3 for internal service provider performance management. Please stop the video now and complete this exercise, as the answers are coming right up. Okay, now you've completed your exercise, let's take a look at what the Service Transition Core volume has to say about measuring the change evaluation process. Firstly, there are 2 suggested key performance indicators from a customer and business perspective. The first customer and business key performance indicator is the number of incidents against a service. These should be low and reducing, as any performance issues are highlighted during evaluation and mitigated where necessary. Secondly, the variance between expected and actual performance should also be low and reducing, again because evaluation will identify any areas of non-conformance. There are also 2 suggested key performance indicators for internal use, to allow the service provider to manage the performance of a process. The first key performance indicator is the number of failed designs that have been transitioned. This should be 0. Secondly, the length of time to perform an evaluation should also be reducing, as the process gets more efficient. What else did you suggest as key performance indicators for the process? There are some challenges associated with the change evaluation process that we need to study. From a managerial perspective, you will need to be aware of these challenges. If they exist in your organization, you will need to be able to identify them and take action to overcome them. The first major challenge for change evaluation is the development of standard performance measures and measurement methods across projects and suppliers. Standard methods need to be in place if an organization is to be able to compare the success of one change against another, but this can be challenging in complex environments. The second challenge is to understand the different stakeholder perspectives that underpin the risk management associated with evaluation activities. In order for risk to be fully assessed and managed, all stakeholder perspectives need to be included. Other processes, such as service level management, may be able to assist in the identification of stakeholders. The third process challenge is also related to risk. This challenge is about the balance between taking risks in order to deliver the organization's strategy and managing risk to an acceptable level. Too much caution may mean services are never delivered at all. Other challenges that affect the change evaluation process are the ability to measure and demonstrate that there actually are fewer variations between performance and predictions during and after transition. It is vital that change evaluation can prove that it is adding value, so it will need to show improvements in this area. The fifth challenge is to adopt a pragmatic and measured approach to risk. Risk cannot be completely removed, so evaluation will need to work with the customer to decide how much risk is acceptable. The sixth challenge is communicating the organizational approach to risk and risk management during a risk evaluation. All stakeholders, including project teams and suppliers, need to know how the organization feels about risk and what levels of risk are acceptable. The last two challenges for the change evaluation process are also related to risk. The seventh challenge is to build a thorough understanding of risks that impact or may impact a service transition. Risk is defined as unpredictability of outcome, so the organization and the evaluation process need to develop a way of predicting risk accurately. Lastly, the development of a risk management culture can also be a challenge to evaluation. Staff may not share information about risk if they feel it will make them look incompetent, or they will be blamed. Organizations need to work hard to develop a culture of knowledge and information sharing around risk. Can you think of any other challenges you'd face in your organization as you implemented the change evaluation process? It's not a syllabus requirement, but you may wish to read more about risk management if you have not had much exposure to this in your career to date. Why not do some web research and personal study? Wikipedia is a good place to start for a summary of risk management. Change evaluation also faces a number of risks. These will include lack of clarity about when evaluation is needed, not enough time allocated for evaluation, or unrealistic expectations. Personnel don't have the skills or experience to carry out evaluation or influence change authorities. Projects and suppliers estimate delivery dates inaccurately. How would you mitigate these risks?